She had worked at the Walls unit for nearly a decade, a respected officer, a rule follower, a woman who never drew suspicion, at least not until it was too late.
Her name was Rebecca Holloway. To her coworkers, she was just Becky, a quiet woman with a routine. She clocked in, did her job, and went home. But outside the prison walls, there was something no one knew, something she never spoke about. For 10 years she carried a secret so dangerous that, once it was exposed, it took only 3 days for her to end up dead. Her body was found locked inside the trunk of her own car. His body, just feet away, bound at the wrists, a single bullet to the head. The scene was brutal. The message, unmistakable. Dispatcher: 911, what's your emergency? Caller, panicked, voice breaking. They're dead. They're both dead. Oh my God. The investigation should have been straightforward. A prison guard, a convicted felon, an illicit affair gone wrong. But it wasn't that simple. The evidence didn't match the story. Theories clashed, motives blurred, and just when investigators thought they had it figured out, a letter arrived. No return address, no fingerprints, just 3 chilling words. It wasn't her. Huntsville, Texas, a town unlike any other. Here, prisons are more than institutions. They're a way of life. The economy thrives on the business of incarceration. Generations of families work behind those bars. Guards, administrators, wardens. The people of Huntsville don't fear the prison system. They are the prison system. For Rebecca Holloway, it was the only world she ever knew. Raised by a sheriff's deputy father and a devout schoolteacher mother, Becky was taught 2 things: respect the law, fear the Lord. And for most of her life, she did both. She had dreams of becoming a police officer, real law enforcement, as her father called it. But after 2 years of college, money ran out. She took the next best thing, a job at the Walls unit, Texas's oldest and most infamous maximum security prison. It was supposed to be temporary, just a job to pay the bills. But then years passed, and Becky stayed. She worked hard, kept her head down. She never gave her co-workers a reason to talk. Becky was quiet, a little too quiet. She did her job, never made a fuss. Some of us joked she was married to the job. But if you asked me then, I would have said she was clean. No way she was up to anything. Outside of work, she was just as unassuming. A devout churchgoer, a creature of habit. No drinking, no partying. And if she had a love life, no one ever saw it. Friends said she had bad luck with men. But the truth was, Becky wasn't looking for love on the outside. By all accounts, Becky was a model officer. No record of misconduct, no history of bending the rules. But there was one thing no one knew. She had been in love with a convicted felon for years. In 2013, everything changed. That was the year Becky was assigned to the prison library, a quiet place, tucked away from the chaos of the cell blocks, a place where guards and inmates weren't supposed to talk, but sometimes they did. That was where she met him, Dante Ramirez, known as Ace inside the prison walls, a gang enforcer from Houston, convicted at 28 for armed robbery and attempted murder. A man who wasn't supposed to have power behind bars, but did. What started as small talk turned into conversations. Conversations turned into trust. Trust turned into something else. Becky began bending rules, small ones at first, an extra book, a little more time in the library, privileges no other inmate received. Text from Becky. I've never met anyone like you. Text from Dante. We understand each other. No one else does. But Dante wasn't just a criminal. He was a strategist. He had spent his entire life learning how to control people. Becky wasn't the first, and she wouldn't be the last. Dante, prison call. You love me, don't you? Becky, prison call. Yes. Dante. Then do this for me. Becky was in too deep before she even realized it. She knew what she was doing was wrong, but she didn't stop. She couldn't. It started with books. Then it was cell phones, money, smuggled notes, and soon, something even more dangerous, a plan. Becky didn't just love Dante. She wanted to be with him, not as a guard, not as an officer, but as his wife. Through a proxy loophole in Texas law, they were married, a female officer and an inmate serving 20 years. But this wasn't a love story. This was something else. Because 3 days later, they were both dead. July 14th, a dark, empty stretch of road 15 miles outside of Huntsville. It was here that a routine patrol officer noticed something unusual, a flickering orange glow on the horizon, smoke rising into the humid Texas air. He thought it was a brush fire. It wasn't. A car, burned beyond recognition. No license plate, no clear markings, just twisted metal and ash, and inside the trunk, a body. Rebecca Holloway, or what was left of her. But Becky wasn't alone. Lying just beyond the wreckage was a second body, face down, hogtied, execution style. Dante Ramirez, shot once in the back of the head. He never saw it coming. And that's when things got strange. Becky's hands were zip-tied behind her back, her body forced into the trunk. Dante's restraints were different, his hands and feet bound with a thick rope, knots tied with military precision. This wasn't a sloppy killing. It was controlled, methodical. And yet, something was missing. No shell casings, no blood where Dante was found, which meant only one thing. This wasn't the primary crime scene. And then, the final clue. Buried beneath Becky's body was her phone, burned, barely functioning. But a forensic team managed to extract her last call. And what they found changed everything. A call made at 1:37 a.m. to a number that didn't exist. Becky was last seen leaving the prison at 12:55 a.m., except there was a problem. She never signed out. According to official records, Rebecca Holloway was still inside the prison when she was murdered. I swear I saw her leave. We all did. She walked right out the front doors. But when they pulled the logs, nothing. It's like she was never there. 2 witnesses saw Becky leave, but on paper, she never did. So where was she really? Then came the footage, prison parking lot, just before 1 a.m. Becky was seen arguing with a man wearing a guard uniform, a man whose face was just out of frame. But here's the thing. No officer working that night matched his build. No one signed out. No one came forward. So who was he? And what was he saying to Becky that night? Text from Becky, 1:10 a.m. I can't do this. I'm scared. Text from unknown, 1:12 a.m. You don't have a choice. And then silence. That was the last message she ever sent. Dante Ramirez, convicted felon, former gang enforcer, a man who had spent years behind bars, but never truly out of power. His influence stretched beyond the prison walls. Even from his cell he had connections, resources, people willing to do whatever he asked. Investigators recognized the markings immediately. They weren't random. They weren't personal. They were a message. Dante wasn't just another inmate. He had a past, one tied to one of Houston's most ruthless criminal organizations. And within that world, loyalty is everything. But so is betrayal. Dante's death was brutal, but it wasn't chaotic. His wrists were bound. His execution was precise. Whoever did this wanted him to suffer, but more than that, they wanted to send a message to someone else. Some believed Dante had crossed a line. Maybe he stole from the wrong people. Maybe he owed a debt he couldn't repay. Or maybe, just maybe, his biggest crime wasn't money, it was trust. Text from unknown. We told you this wouldn't end well. Text from Dante. You don't control me anymore. Dante had done something unforgivable. He had fallen in love with someone on the other side of the bars, an officer, someone who could bring him protection, information, and if the gang had found out, he wouldn't have been given a second chance. The symbols carved into his skin weren't random. They were punishment. A ritual for those who turned their back on the people who made them who they were. And in those circles, when one man falls, anyone connected to him falls with him. If this was a gang hit, Dante's fate was sealed the moment he said, "I do." But that raises a question. Why kill Becky too? If she wasn't part of their world, why didn't they just let her walk away? Becky had been careful. No one knew about her secret relationship. No one except for the people who worked alongside her every day. The officers. The ones who saw her lingering too long near Dante's cell. The ones who noticed how she would let small rules slide. The ones who kept secrets of their own. The night Becky died, she was seen arguing with a man dressed as a guard. But when investigators searched the logs, there was no record of him being there. No one admitted to seeing him. No one recognized the uniform. And that begs the question, was he even supposed to be there at all? Months before her death, Becky had been under quiet investigation. Some suspected she was smuggling contraband into the prison, cell phones, cigarettes, even cash. And if that was true, it meant someone else knew her secret long before she died. Officer, you don't cross the wrong people in that place. If she was helping someone and someone else found out, she wouldn't have walked away from it. So if Becky was working with the wrong people, was her murder a message or a cleanup operation? But maybe this wasn't a setup at all. Maybe Becky wasn't the victim we thought she was. Maybe she was something else entirely. Rebecca Holloway was described as a rule follower. But what if she wasn't? What if the woman everyone thought they knew had been planning something from the beginning? Some believe Becky was helping Dante prepare for something bigger, a breakout, an escape, a way to finally leave the walls of that prison behind and start over somewhere else. But if that was true, did something go wrong? Did someone double-cross her? Or did she double-cross Dante? Dante, prison call. Do you trust me? Becky, prison call. More than anything. That call was made 3 days before she was murdered. And yet, less than 72 hours later, she was found bound and stuffed in a trunk. So the question remains, was Becky a victim of someone else's game, or was she playing one of her own? 3 theories, 3 possible explanations. But the truth is still out there. 2 weeks had passed. The case was still fresh. Investigators were piecing together fragments of a story that refused to align. Becky and Dante were dead. The evidence pointed in too many directions. No arrests, no leads, no official suspects. And then, something happened. It arrived on an ordinary afternoon. A small package, no return address, no postmark. Just a plain, unmarked envelope left in the mailroom. It could have been anything. Routine paperwork, a misplaced memo. But it wasn't. 7 words, no explanation, no signature, no context. Just a message, and a new mystery. At first, investigators dismissed it. A prank, a hoax. But there was something strange. No fingerprints, no DNA, no way to track who had left it behind. It raised more questions than answers. It wasn't supposed to be her. Which meant someone else was. If Becky wasn't the intended target, who was? Dante? Someone else entirely? Or was this a warning? In the weeks that followed, more details surfaced. Fragments of conversations, gaps in security footage, and then something no one expected. A new piece of footage, one that had been overlooked in the initial investigation. It showed Becky inside the prison, speaking to someone just outside the frame. Investigators tried to enhance the image, to see who she was speaking to, but the figure never stepped into view. All that remained was Becky's reaction. She was scared. She knew something, or someone knew something about her, and whatever was said in that moment may have sealed her fate. Then came the call, a voicemail left at 2:12 a.m. on the night of Becky's murder. A call from an unlisted number, a call that was nearly erased. It's done, but there's a problem. It's done, but there's a problem. That's all they heard. No name, no location, just those 6 words. A voice that no one could trace. A message that was never meant to be found. Who sent the letter? Who made the call? And what was the problem?
2 people dead, no clear motive, no arrests, only scattered fragments of a story that refuses to close.
Then who was it supposed to be? We have the facts, we have the evidence, but what we don't have is the answer. A correctional officer with no history of misconduct. A convicted gang enforcer with a past that never let go. A love story that should have never happened. A marriage that lasted only 3 days. And a murder that has left more questions than answers. Was this a gang execution? A warning to anyone who dared to cross the line between loyalty and betrayal? Was this the work of a corrupt officer? Someone desperate to keep their own secrets buried? Or was Becky hiding something? Was this never about love, but about something else entirely? And then there's the letter. 7 words that change everything. It wasn't supposed to be her. If Becky wasn't the target, then who was? And who is still walking free?
If you find this story interesting and you want part 2, don't forget to subscribe and click the like button for more true crime stories like this.